You are sitting at your desk, the room is quiet, and the only light comes from the soft glow of your monitor. You have a complex problem, something that has been swirling in your mind like a thick mist for days. Perhaps it is a business strategy, a difficult piece of code, or a personal dilemma. You decide to ask for help, so you open a chat window with an artificial intelligence. You start typing, "How can I better manage the logistics of my new project considering the budget constraints of the first quarter?" And then it happens. Before you even finish the sentence, before your finger hits the enter key to send the message, the fog clears. The answer reveals itself to you, not because the machine spoke, but because you did. This is the universal aha moment, a flash of insight that strikes right before the reply even exists. It is a strange phenomenon that happens to millions of people every day. We think we are seeking answers from a digital oracle, but in reality, the very act of formulating the question has solved the problem for us. We often live under a psychological spell called the illusion of explanatory depth. It is a cognitive bias where we believe we understand a concept perfectly well until we are forced to explain it to another entity. Think about a common object, like a bicycle or a zipper. If someone asked you if you know how a bicycle works, you would likely say yes without hesitation. But if they handed you a piece of paper and asked you to draw the exact placement of the chain, the pedals and the gears to make it functional, most people would fail. Our minds are masters of taking shortcuts. We store vague mental images rather than detailed blueprints. We mistake familiarity for understanding. This internal state of logical inconsistency is what we call fuzzy thinking. It is the antagonist of our mental clarity, a ghost that haunts our thoughts until the light of expression is turned on. When we interact with an artificial intelligence, we often imagine there's a ghost in the machine, a sentient presence with the answers to all our woes. However, it is more accurate to view the artificial intelligence as a cognitive mirror. It is a neutral, non-judgmental surface that reflects the structure, or the lack thereof, of our own thoughts. When you type into that empty prompt box, you are not just inputting data. You are projecting your internal logic onto a digital canvas. If your thoughts are fragmented, the reflection is blurry. If your thoughts are precise, the reflection is sharp. The machine does not possess wisdom in the human sense, but it demands it from us. It forces us to take the liquid ideas floating in our heads and freeze them into solid sentences. This process is not easy. There is a specific kind of friction that occurs when we transition from vague mental images to structured syntax. Think of it like a sieve. Your brain is full of raw data, emotions, and half-formed concepts. When you try to push that massive volume of information through the narrow opening of a sentence, the fuzzy thinking gets caught in the mesh. Only the most logical and coherent parts can pass through. This friction is necessary. It is a creative fire that burns away logical inconsistencies. You cannot tell a machine, "You know what I mean," like you can with a human friend. The machine requires literalism. It requires a sequence of nouns and verbs that follow a strict path. This friction slows us down, and in that slowing down, we find the gaps in our own stories. This brings us to a central question that defines our modern era. Is the artificial intelligence actually getting smarter with every update? Or are we simply becoming more aware of our own intelligence when we are forced to speak to it? We often credit the tool for the result, but perhaps the true magic is happening inside the human skull. We are witnessing a revolution of the mind, where the silence of the prompt box acts as a catalyst for human evolution. Are we using the machine to think for us, or are we using it to see how we think? There is a certain psychological weight to the empty cursor. It blinks at you with a rhythmic persistence, like a heartbeat. It is a vacuum that demands to be filled. Unlike an internal monologue, which can wander from a grocery list to a childhood memory in a split second, the prompt box requires a level of precision that we rarely ask of ourselves. It is a silent witness that does not interrupt, does not judge, and does not provide shortcuts. This silence is a pressure cooker for the mind. It forces you to stop and think about what you're actually trying to say. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The moment you identify an external recipient for your thoughts, your brain undergoes a dramatic shift. It moves from passive processing to active construction. Inside your mind, there is an internal architect that usually sleeps while you daydream. But when you prepare to communicate, this architect wakes up. It begins to sort through the chaos, looking for the strongest pillars of logic to support your argument. It builds a bridge between your internal world and the external interface. This is why you feel a sense of mental strain when trying to explain something complex. You are literally building a structure in real time, one word at a time. The architect must ensure that step A leads to step B, and that step C is a logical consequence of both. Why do thoughts feel so solid inside our heads, but so liquid when we try to pour them into words? It is because, inside our own minds, we are both the speaker and the listener. We give ourselves a free pass on logic because we already know the hidden context of our feelings. But when we externalize those thoughts, we realize that the solid ideas were actually quite thin. By pouring them out, we can finally see their true shape. We see where the connections are weak and where the foundation is crumbling. This realization is the first step toward true mastery. By confronting the liquid nature of our unexpressed thoughts, we gain the power to mold them into something permanent and powerful. We move from the shadows of intuition into the light of articulated reason. This practice of externalizing our internal chaos is not a new invention of the digital age. Long before we had glowing screens and complex algorithms, software engineers discovered a curious trick known as rubber ducking. The premise is almost absurdly simple. When a programmer encounters a bug in their code that they cannot solve, they are encouraged to explain the logic of that code, line by line, to a small, inanimate plastic duck sitting on their desk. To an outside observer, it looks like a moment of madness. However, the results are undeniable. By the time the engineer reaches the problematic line of code, they often stop mid-sentence, realizing exactly where the logic fails. The duck did not speak. It did not offer a suggestion. It merely existed as a target for the human's explanation. In our modern era, the artificial intelligence has become the ultimate evolution of the rubber duck. It provides a more sophisticated target, one that can actually respond, yet the core magic remains the same. The act of speaking the problem out loud or typing it into a chat box forces us to transition from the intuitive realm of thinking into the structured realm of communicating. This phenomenon is backed by decades of psychological research. In 1989, a researcher named Micheline Chi conducted a landmark study on what is now known as the self-explanation effect. She observed students as they attempted to learn complex scientific concepts and solve difficult problems. What she found was startling. The students who performed the best were not necessarily the ones with the highest baseline intelligence or the most expensive study materials. Instead, the top performers were those who consistently explained the concepts to themselves or to an imaginary listener as they moved through the material. These students were actively building deeper mental models. When we explain a concept to an artificial intelligence, we are engaging in this very same high-level cognitive exercise. We are acting as our own teachers. By articulating the steps of a problem to the machine, we reveal the hidden gaps in our own understanding that we would have otherwise ignored. We are forced to confront what we do not know, and in that confrontation, true learning begins. And one of the primary reasons this works so effectively is related to how we manage our cognitive load. Our brains have a limited capacity for what we call working memory. Think of it as the mental scratch pad, where you hold information while you are actively manipulating it. When you try to solve a complex problem entirely within your own head, your working memory quickly becomes overwhelmed. You are trying to hold the facts, analyze the relationships, and search for a solution all at once. It is like trying to juggle 10 balls while also attempting to recite a poem. By using the artificial intelligence interface as a workspace, you effectively offload your working memory onto the screen. Once the information is written down in the prompt box, your brain no longer has to struggle to remember every single detail. This frees up your neural resources for high-level logic and creative problem-solving. The screen becomes an extension of your mind, a physical space where you can see your thoughts laid out before you, allowing you to manipulate them with much greater precision and clarity. The artificial intelligence also imposes a unique set of constraints that a human listener simply does not provide. When you talk to a friend or colleague, there is a massive amount of shared context and intuition involved. You can use vague terms, skip steps in your logic, or rely on body language to convey your meaning. Your human counterpart will instinctively fill in the blanks. They will say, "I know what you mean," and move on. This is helpful for social bonding, but it can be a disaster for clear thinking. The machine, however, has no intuition. It does not know what you mean unless you tell it exactly. It forces you to be literal, to define your terms, and to maintain a rigorous internal consistency. If there is a logic gap in your prompt, the machine will follow that gap to a faulty conclusion, and you will see your own error reflected in its output. This lack of shared intuition acts as a linguistic filter. As you choose specific nouns and verbs to describe your problem, you are essentially using a sieve to catch fuzzy thinking. You're forced to translate a multidimensional cloud of thought into a linear, logical sequence of words that the machine can process. This process is the very definition of metacognition, which is the act of thinking about your own thinking. When you sit before the prompt box, you are not just a user, you are an observer of your own mental processes. You are watching how your ideas take shape in real time. You're noticing which parts are easy to explain and which parts feel muddy or confused. The interface acts as a physical workspace for this metacognitive reflection. It is a mirror that shows you the quality of your own logic before you even send the message. However, this level of clarity comes with a significant neural cost. Organizing your thoughts for another entity, even an artificial one, requires a massive amount of metabolic effort. Your brain is burning glucose as it works to create these structures. This is why you might feel exhausted after a session of intense prompting or complex explanation. It is hard work, to be clear, but this effort is not wasted. Psychologists have found that the more mental energy we spend organizing information, the more likely we are to retain that information in our long-term memory. The struggle for clarity is the very thing that makes the knowledge stick, transforming a fleeting thought into a permanent intellectual asset. This idea of finding truth through structured dialogue is not a new concept. It traces its roots back thousands of years to the Socratic method. Socrates, the ancient philosopher, believed that wisdom was not something that could be poured from one person to another like water into a jar. Instead, he believed that wisdom was pulled out of an individual through the use of carefully structured questions and dialogue. He acted as a midwife for ideas, helping others give birth to their own insights by forcing them to examine their own assumptions. Today, the artificial intelligence has stepped into that historical role. It is not necessarily providing the wisdom itself. It is the catalyst that helps us extract it from ourselves. By demanding a certain level of precision, and by providing a non-judgmental space for us to speak, the machine helps us navigate the ancient path from ignorance to articulated reason. We are using the most advanced technology of the 21st century to engage in a mental exercise that is as old as civilization itself. We are seeking the same clarity that the philosophers sought, and we are finding it in the reflection of our own words, as they appear on the screen, one character at a time. The feedback loop reaches its most critical point at the very moment you see the first few words of the response appearing on your screen. You watch the cursor move with a rhythmic, mechanical speed, and suddenly you realize that the artificial intelligence is heading in the wrong direction. It is not that the machine has failed, but rather that it has followed your instructions to the letter, revealing the exact point where your own logic was flawed. You see your lack of clarity reflected back at you like a distorted image in a mirror. This is the moment of cognitive recalibration. You do not blame the machine for being unintelligent. Instead, you recognize that your own internal architect failed to provide a solid foundation. You go back to the prompt, deleting a sentence here and adding a specific detail there. You are no longer just talking to an algorithm. You are actively debugging your own thought process in real time. This cycle of input and observation creates a tension that forces your mind to operate at a higher frequency. This transition from the internal to the external is a process of linearization. The human mind naturally thinks in a web. Our thoughts are nonlinear, messy, and interconnected by loose associations, memories, and emotions. We jump from a specific fact to a vague feeling in a fraction of a second. This is the realm where fuzzy thinking thrives, hiding in the dark corners between these tangled connections. However, language is inherently linear. You cannot say two words at the exact same time. One must follow the other in a sequence that obeys the laws of grammar and logic. When you are forced to translate that mental web into a linear string of text for the artificial intelligence, you are performing a radical act of cognitive architecture. You are building a bridge where before there was only a fog. This transition forces you to fix broken causal links. You have to decide what comes first, what the necessary foundation is, and how one point leads to the next. In this linearization, the invisible flaws in your reasoning become visible. You are forced to straighten the crooked paths of your own mind before the machine can ever hope to understand you. One of the greatest barriers to clear thinking in social situations is the human ego. When we speak to a human colleague, a teacher, or a mentor, we are often more concerned with sounding smart than being clear. We hide our confusion behind jargon or skip over things we do not understand because we fear judgment. We do not want to admit that we are lost. But the artificial intelligence has no ego and offers no judgment. It is a silent, tireless, and non-judgmental witness. This creates a unique psychological safety zone that is rarely found in human interaction. Before the empty prompt box, you can be completely vulnerable. You can admit to the machine that you do not understand a basic concept, or you can present a half-baked idea without the fear of social consequences. This lack of social pressure allows you to be more honest with yourself. You can strip away the layers of pretense and get to the raw core of the problem. In the silence of this digital workspace, you're finally free to be wrong until you are right. We often think of the act of prompting as a way to control the machine, but in reality, we are prompting ourselves. The act of refining a query is a prompt for the human brain to perform at its highest cognitive level. You are asking your internal architect to dig deeper, to find a more precise word, and to structure the information with more rigor. The machine is merely the destination, but the journey is entirely internal. This is where the true value lies. The artificial intelligence is not just a tool for generating content, it is a tool for generating clarity. As you strive to provide better data to the machine, you begin to realize where your own internal training data is lacking. You notice the blind spots in your knowledge. You realize that you cannot explain the third step of a process because you do not actually understand it yet. The predictive nature of the artificial intelligence highlights your own lack of predictability. It exposes the gaps where your knowledge is thin and forces you to fill them. In this grand narrative of the digital age, it is easy to focus on the power of the silicon and the complexity of the neural networks. But as we reach the conclusion of this exploration, it becomes clear that the artificial intelligence is not the true protagonist of the story. You are the protagonist. The value is not found in the final output that the machine provides, but in the human input that created it. The artificial intelligence is a catalyst, a 21st century version of the rubber duck that engineers have used for decades to find the bugs in their code. It is the friction that polishes the diamond of human thought. The goal was never to get the perfect answer from the machine. The goal was to achieve a state of perfect clarity within yourself. The machine is the mirror, but the light comes from you. As we look back at the history of human thought, from the structured dialogues of Socrates to the educational theories of Micheline Chi, we see a consistent theme. True understanding is not a passive state of being. It is an active state of doing. It is the result of the struggle to express the inexpressible. We live in an era where information is abundant, but clarity is rare. In such a world, the most powerful tool we possess is not the one sitting on our desks, but the one sitting inside our skulls. The human ability to seek clarity through expression remains our greatest strength and our most enduring legacy. The next time you find yourself sitting before that blinking cursor, and you suddenly stop because you have found the answer halfway through typing the question, do not be surprised. Do not simply close the tab and move on. Take a moment to recognize that flash of insight for what it is. It is the moment your mind organized itself. It is the moment fuzzy thinking was defeated by the simple, ancient act of trying to be understood. You have used the machine to find yourself, and in that moment of clarity, you have achieved the highest form of human intelligence. The mirror has done its job, and you are finally seeing your own thoughts for the very first time.